You are listening to the Courageously Unconventional podcast. If you want to change your life and start living on your own terms, you're in the right place. I'm your host, Lynn Grogan. I'm a certified life coach, and I want to help you take action toward creating your own unconventional life. Each week, I'll share inspiring and unconventional stories from those who have gone before you, as well as actionable steps you can take to start your own unconventional path today. Let's go! This week on the Courageously Unconventional podcast, I am so excited to share a conversation with one of my coaching clients, Dr. Mia Woodward. Mia is a tenured clinician scientist and certified life coach. She is a graduate of Yale College and Columbia College of Physicians and Surgeons, and she integrates her foundation in medicine with her deep passion for clinical behavior change research. In today's episode, Mia shares her inspiring story of taking a 4-month sabbatical this past summer. We talk about imposter syndrome, how coaching played a role in creating her sabbatical, the challenges she faced in setting boundaries and learning to say no, the impact of this intentional break on her perspective around life and family and career, and what her future looks like post-sabbatical, or as you'll find out in this episode, mid-sabbatical. If you're considering a sabbatical or seeking a more fulfilling work-life balance, this episode offers lots of insights and inspiration. Enjoy my conversation with Dr. Mia Woodward. All right, welcome back to the Courageously Unconventional podcast. Today, I have a very special guest on the show, one of my coaching clients, Mia Woodward. Mia, thanks for coming on the podcast.
Thank you. I'm so happy to be here. Thanks for inviting me.
Yeah, so why don't you go ahead at the top here and just introduce yourself and share just a little bit about yourself for the listeners.
Sure. My name is Mia Woodward. I'm an ophthalmologist and researcher, and I live in Michigan. I live here with my family, my partner, and my 2 sons.
So I was trying to think about this the other day. How long have we been working together in some coaching
Oh,
capacity?
man. So I guess in some coaching capacity, 4, 5 years? Does that sound track with you? Does that sound about right?
Yeah, I think
Something
so.
like that. Yeah. So it's been a while, which has been wonderful. And I was really excited when you started coaching clients one-on-one because I knew we really were a nice fit. And so I love coaching with you.
Thanks, Mia. But what brought you to coaching in the first place? Like way back, whatever, 5, 6
Yeah.
years ago.
Yeah. So I had been privileged with and this I guess dovetails in with like sort of good mentorship and leadership, but I had been privileged with being given an executive coach through work, and she and I really hit it off. She's a lovely woman, and she just taught me a lot, and I learned a lot. It was much more focused on work related goals, but we talked through a bunch of scenarios. I worked through them, and I really saw the power of having someone talk to you sort of who had the experience at a very high level, but then could give you direct guidance to work through the things that you are personally facing. And so I think I understood the power of that coaching that was both from a methods background, but also one-on-one. And so when I got introduced or found about life coaching and just general coaching, I was very intrigued. And what I liked about that is that it was less directed than some
Mm.
executive coaching, where you're really trying to meet work performance goals, and I could really choose my own adventure. And that really has served me so well for the past 5 years. I really have benefited a lot from someone help me reflect back what I'm thinking to me, and then help me see ways to think about it in new ways and move forward in the ways I want to.
Yeah. Can you think of anything specific either that you and I have worked on or other areas of your coaching where it stands out to you where you're like, wow, coaching really helped me here figure something out in my life?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Which domain of my life do you want to say
You're
that
like, let's talk
coaching has
about this last
improved?
week.
I know, it's like there's too many options. But the first one that comes to mind, given that the topic we're going to talk about in a little bit is on the podcast here today is really about, feeling comfortable at work and feeling confident in your ability, in your performance and your ability, right? Whether it manifests as imposter syndrome or feeling behind, or getting up on a national stage and speaking. There's a lot of am I smart enough wrapped up in that. And I've worked a ton with coaches and you over the years with how my brain's worry worry thoughts that come up in those situations, and they've evolved over time. But really just seeing them for what they are, and working through why they're there, has really, really been helpful, because now I just see them coming and understand where they're coming from and accept that that's just part of a little bit of the process.
Which I think some people could find surprising about you, just because I think if somebody was just looking at your CV, they'd just be like, oh, this woman's got it. Like she wouldn't
Yeah,
ever have imposter syndrome thoughts at
correct.
all.
Yeah, it was funny. I
Yeah.
just gave a named lectureship at our national meeting, which is kind of a big deal. And they were introducing me, and I was like, "Are you sure that's me?" And I'm like, "It's true. I have done everything on that list, and I can see how that's a pretty impressive list." But and of course, I've been coached so much on this before. But it's funny that you forget that everyone who's anywhere has a human brain and naturally doesn't default to like walking around being like, you're welcome, I'm awesome. I mean, if we could only channel Maui from Moana all the time. But it's hard to just like not have default programming. And maybe that's, um or mechanisms in our society that create that as well. But it's hard not to question yourself, and so it just manifests in different ways in different forums, right? So,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah,
I had that the other day. I was in a big Zoom room with people and I was speaking, and midway through, I was like, all right, I'm really glad we're recording this because my heart is beating like basically out of my throat and I'm barely able to concentrate. And the person I was talking to, he was like, wow, I would not know that. You look cute, cool as a cucumber. And I think it's
yep,
just, we look at people, we think that they've got it all together. And then behind the scenes, there's just that, the track
yeah,
record of everything that's going on. So I appreciate you
right.
sharing that, because I think a lot of people deal with that, but just don't actually think that everyone deals with it. They think it's just them.
Everybody deals with it. And I think actually it's a good thing. I don't know, I was reading more about this recently, and sort of like the things that we think are our limitations are actually our assets, and it's just about framing. And that nervous energy is really just trying to protect us, right, from doing brave things, but it wouldn't be there if we weren't doing brave things, right? And so I've sort of realized it's actually just a sign of bravery in a lot of ways. Like
Mm.
those nervous butterflies are really because you are about to do something daring. And that's helped a lot. As well as just like kind of looking at ground truth and seeing the evidence for what's really fact and fiction. I'm like, I think they're asking me to speak because I am kind of like a seriously high level expert on this topic. As opposed to like, wow, I can't believe they're asking me to speak. So
Yeah, it's like you have
yes,
to
it's
stop
very
yourself from looking
funny.
over your shoulder and going, "Ooh,
Yes.
wait, me? Me?"
Well, and I'm also very comfortable with this level of vulnerability too. And I think that's very surprising, especially for trainees, who are like, how is it possible that you have these fears? And I'm like, how is it possible I wouldn't? I'm still a human. And I think it's very level setting for a lot of people where they can say, like, oh, I could still do this even though I too share those things. So I don't know. I'm pretty comfortable admitting to
Yeah.
this.
Well, I love that you share that too, because somebody has to start the conversation. And it's certainly probably not
Yeah,
going to be somebody who's so up in their head and hasn't had any tools to figure it out. So,
right,
um, but
right.
yes, I guess the too long didn't read here is that yes, we are all human and we have human brains deal with
Yes,
human things.
yes.
Um, well, how about we talk about your sabbatical? Because obviously that has been a theme in our coaching for, I don't know, probably a year at least now at this
Yeah,
point.
yeah. I would
Yeah.
love
So
to.
what made you want to take it? What does it look like for you? That kind of thing.
So at my institution, you're able to go on a sabbatical when you have tenure. And I got tenure, and then for a couple of years knew that going on a sabbatical was possible, but I didn't really know what I wanted to do with that time. But I also knew I really wanted to take a pause, and have a moment where I'm not on the same hamster wheel, bullet train, whatever analogy you want to go, and recognizing the importance of that creative space and separation from your day-to-day life, and the power that that can have to influence change and influence growth. So I was knew I wanted to do it, but didn't know what I wanted sabbatical to look like for me. And really, it was my relation, me talking to you about it, where you knew about sabbaticals, you had really taken breaks and pauses yourself, and very concretely introduced me to some links and things to articles that I understood what different sabbaticals could look like. And that was simultaneously happening while I was talking to the leadership at my university about what does it look like at this university, like structurally what it looks like. And I learned so much in the process of that as well, because a lot of people have taken sabbatical, but each one can look different, but there's, guidelines and rules around it. And so financial things that you need to know what's going to happen to your salary during that time, and how physically, like, just it's structured by day, how far out you need to plan, whose approvals you need to get, all those kind of things. And our university is very clear on those things. So it just was about opening those documents and saying, like, what does it really take? And that was happening while I was really over a year, sort of honing on what topic I might want to do. I had one idea, I didn't love it. It was a strong idea, but just didn't feel right for the time and space that I was in. And then sort of landed on a topic for the academic side that was more aligned with my current goals. And that really gave it some life, because I was like, I can really see myself taking time to do that. And I think the mind management piece and the actual being willing to look at the under the hood of like how the car works to go on sabbatical were happening in real time and interacting with each other, and which really led to being successful and being executed. My sabbatical is 6 months, but you're allowed to break it up into chunks at my institution. Also didn't know that. And so because I'm a clinician as well, I broke it up into a 4-month chunk, and then I have another 2-month chunk coming up. But yeah, so I'm finished my 4-month chunk. I'm back in full time at my job, and then I have this other 2-month chunk happening later in the year.
When you first thought about a sabbatical, what did you think it was going to be about, and how has that transformed as you've gone along?
Yeah, people always talk about it. Oh, you go international and you take your family and you're like complete. I don't know. I thought I'd be like this international. I don't know if there were camels involved, but there was definitely like something about this international experience. And I didn't go international. My husband is a full-time clinician, and he was not he doesn't work for an academic institution. And he was like, I can't just leave for 6 months. So I had to rethink what it looked like. And I knew from other people that it was often an intellectual deep dive, but I frankly didn't have that many peers or mentors who had done one, who were also in medicine. Because a lot of times sabbaticals are like, you go and you write your book or something, or you go explore a new topic. But when you're also taking care of patients, I really didn't know a ton of people who'd done it. And so I had to start really asking around, especially at my institution, of what that looked like. But you had introduced me to an article that sort of, I think had four, I don't remember, but I think had four
Yeah.
domains of the types of themes of sabbaticals. And I never even thought about that. I was like, oh yeah, like you go somewhere and you're embedded in another university and like learn all about X that place does well. And then my first idea for a sabbatical the person, my mentor at the time, was asking me to basically jump around to all these international locations. And I was like, I have a family and kids. Like, I cannot do that, And so I had to sort of restructure what that meant to be. I had to sort of see what would be possible and what could fit in my life. And like, I didn't want to ditch my family. I kind of like them. So not even kind of, I
Like those
really
kiddos
like
and
them.
husband.
I do.
And the research you're talking about is the sabbatical project, right? That website. I think that's the one I
Yeah,
sent.
exactly.
It is. It
Exactly.
is. I will
Yeah.
confirm it is, I think. But I think that's interesting too, because it's like you could have, I guess, somehow figured out how to do all those far-flung things. You could have. I mean, it would have been
Yeah.
disruptive. Probably. Yeah, very.
Yeah.
And maybe that would have been the point. But I think what you're getting at is that that isn't the thing that you wanted to focus on is me going, or sorry, you going to different cultures, experiencing that. It's like it sounds like figured out, and we talked about a lot is what you actually need from that time and that time
Right.
off. And like, where did you land with that? What did you figure out you actually needed from it?
Yeah. I mean, I think it was a lot of um, stopping responsibilities I've had for a long time and putting a pause on those responsibilities. Um, Not because I disliked them, but by not doing them on a daily or weekly schedule, it just created a lot more space in my brain and my time to spend that time diving deeper on a topic or a category of topics, as well as just physically not doing them, right? Like
Mm.
not logging into X blah, blah, blah to do X task or not going to a clinic once a week and going to the OR and, going traveling for my various activities on a regular basis. It was just schedule disruptor in a way that one thing I really wanted to make sure to say, it was very disconcerting at first. Like it did not, the beginning of my sabbatical was not happy, happy, joy, joy. It was really uncomfortable. And
In what
the
way?
yeah, physically, like my body was
Mm.
like reacting to have that much time and space and not check my work email like daily and all of these things. And I didn't realize how embedded, really at a deep level, those were to sort of who I thought of myself as. I guess getting back to that imposter syndrome slash expert, known as an expert kind of stuff. And I actually saw my aunt early on in that time, who's always been a wise mentor, and she was a pediatrician. And I was like, my body does not like. I'm worried. I'm not. I'm not naturally an anxious person, and I've had times in my life, but I'm not naturally anxious. And I was anxious and um, just a little more frazzled than baseline, like revved up, and she said, yeah, wait till retirement because that's how you feel for a while after you retired. And some of it was as simple as like do like I was deliberately not replying to emails and email threads because I knew that would keep me very much in that world of the day to day. And I had to trust that the other people could, navigate whatever the issue was. Um, but then that also led to this, oh my gosh, then they're going to realize they don't need me kind of thing,
Oh,
I guess.
yeah.
And that was scary, but then liberating. But it was uncomfortable for a while. There's something there about sort of being needed as part of a big system, and then the system not really needing you. That was a little bit overwhelming, I think, at first. But trust me, they welcomed me right back. They're like, oh, thank God you're back. Because I was working and executing and helping group themes, right? And
Mm.
projects and clinics and all the things. Yeah, it's been fascinating these, I guess, 3 weeks I've been back. Everyone's like, oh, thank God you're back. And so I do really am grateful for so many colleagues who were like, good for you, and held off on
Yeah.
demanding things of me during that time. It wouldn't happen without the culture that luckily I'm a part of.
So I think part of this is that you didn't know that everything was going to be okay when you went back, right? Not having checked emails or participating for
Right.
a while. So I think for a lot of people, and even if you're not on sabbatical, it's really easy to convince yourself after hours on the weekend, I should be checking my email. I should be checking in. People need me. So, how did you help yourself not just jump right back into that space? Because it could have been like, oh, I will just start checking email again because that'll make me feel better. How did you
Well,
do it?
first of all, I would say that I am not perfect. I totally checked email on sabbatical. I just highly changed the pace and frequency and my uh so that will be for sabbatical, my next sabbatical. I'll go with that.
Ooh.
I'll do that. That'll be my
I'm
next
like
challenge.
noting
Lynn, you
this
can
for
coach
future
me. I
coaching
know.
sessions.
And I'm like, oh gosh, don't tell her this. She'll make me get coaching on it. No, I'm just kidding.
Because I'm such a meanie.
No, I know. That was good. You want someone to kind of be like,
Oh,
you
yeah.
said this, right? I'm like, man. So I was not a purist or anything, but I did hold back and I did not reply to a category of things that I'm like, that's not in my purview right now. I kept my research very much alive. My personal labs research very much alive during the time. So that was a bit of a dance because I was like one foot in one door and then not through the other doors, right? So, but I did hold back from certain categories of things. And I think I realized that the bullet train always welcomes people who are willing to do the work.
Hmm.
Like, if you are willing to show up and help, it's not like they turn you away. I realized that, like, I contribute value just by showing up and doing what I say I was going to do. And that's just not going to be turned down. And so there was no pressing need for me when I was explicit and clear about what I was going to help with and not going to help with during that time. I made sure I was clear in my communication about what could be expected of me during that time. And I guess really it was only that first couple weeks, like maybe 2, 3 weeks at the most, that I had that disquiet about this physical discomfort was sort of not being part of the show, the game, the whatever. And after that, I was like, no. Like, I work hard, I help a lot, like I do good stuff, like they're gonna want me back. So it didn't linger. I mean, it's just like October 1st, you're like, you're back, right? And I'm like, like, yeah, not surprising. So it was really just like a temporary sort of my own brain
Mm.
kind of readjusting. And I did have some mentorship there was another woman who had taken a sabbatical a while ago in our department. And she was like, I was really bad with boundaries. Like she helped me like recognize that it's only as boundaried as you set it up to be. And that helped try to frame things early on.
Yeah. Well, and it's interesting that you talk about like, oh yeah, I reassured myself it was not a problem. They're going to want me back. But I wonder if there was a space in which you were starting to think about whether or not you wanted to go back to some of those things.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, you take down all of these categories and then you're like, will I enjoy it's a friend of ours, a person I know through the coaching world, and I'm so blessed, and I know you know her too, Summer, has this wonderful analogy where I guess like the Milwaukee TSA has this, they call the post TSA in the airport area recombobulation, where you like put all of your stuff on the conveyor belt and then it goes through the TSA check and then you take it back up again. And she's like, her analogy is like, you don't have to put everything back in your purse, or your bags that you put down before the conveyor belt. And it very much felt like that. It's like, okay, I don't have access to any of my stuff right now. It's all in the middle of being security screened. And on the other side, like, do I actually want to pull these things back out of the little bin or just toss them? And you and I did that, I remember, like
Hmm.
before sabbatical, as a exercise where we really thought about all the buckets and which of those buckets I really want to retake on. It was overwhelming. Like, you realize how many things you're involved with in so many different ways on micro and macro levels, and really thinking through which of those are things you want to keep or really don't. and need to find a better steward for that thing. And I think that's been the easiest way for me to let go of activities, to say like, I don't want to do this. And I don't have the capacity to do, I might be capable of doing it, but I have the capacity to do it at the level I would want it done. And who would be the best person to then do this task? And sort of that path it forward kind of thing is really fun, actually, because someone else could care about it more, and maybe it's their passion if it's not yours.
Yeah.
So
Well, and I think
yeah,
that's one of your superpowers too, is that you connect with a lot of people. And so so I think sometimes if we think about stopping something, it's just like then we're having this discomfort. Who's going to do it? I have to do this. They're expecting me to do it.
right.
And sometimes even just shifting it to, no, this other person over here would be perfect for this thing that you're needing to do. And let me introduce you. Like sometimes that bit of it could even ease
Yeah.
some of the discomfort.
And I think it's been wonderful doing that. And I think my next growth is not always having to find a person either. Like sometimes I feel like I have to do, like I really want to do a warm handoff to the next person. And then sometimes it's like, that's not my job. Like, I was
Mhm.
asked to do this job and I don't have to warmly hand it off. Like I just said no to a committee appointment that I'm sure they were surprised I said no to like going for another 4 years. And I really wanted to identify who would be best next. And I was like, I just don't know. So I asked around, but I just felt like it was time for me to tell the person I wasn't re-upping. So I don't have a name to give to them. And I'm
Mm.
obviously still noodling on it. If I can think of a name, I'll pass it forward, but that's okay too. Like I don't have to perfectly hand it off.
Yeah. Like it could just be no and best of luck to y'all. Like I wish you
Yes.
well. Oh.
Yes.
And I think that's an interesting space to be in too, because it can seem like, oh, but I have to continue working, even if it doesn't look like how they originally had me on board here. I'm going
Yeah.
to continue working by handing you a person, but it's like maybe you don't need to do any of that. It's like questioning
Yeah.
each of these spaces that you're in and just saying, would I choose this again? Would I do this
Yeah.
again? Do I want to keep doing this? Does it make sense for the future that I want to do for like create for myself? Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And it sounds like that's a lot of the evaluation. And I know we've talked about a lot in coaching too, is that evaluation of like, what does the future look like? And do each of the different hats I've been wearing, does that contribute to the future I want to create? And then doing the work to let some of it go, if that's where you come to.
Totally agree. And when you're in the process of starting to say no to stuff, sometimes you forget the fact that by saying no, you will create more opportunities that are more aligned with the things you want to do. It's so tempting, especially in academia, where you're like, oh, I need to meet these metrics and, have a national, international reputation, to see these national, international kind of things that are offered to you. And I do think it was very valuable for me early in my career to say a lot of yeses, because I didn't really know what I wanted to do with my career specifically. And you get exposed to a lot of different things and activities. I guess, for example, I really wanted to be involved in our national organization, ophthalmology organization, and the CEO of the organization at the time came and gave a visiting lecture at our institution. And I basically had a meeting with him. The chair was nice enough to set us up for 30 minutes. I said, look, I'll do anything. Just like put me in, coach. And I got assigned to something super random. And I was like, oh, okay. And like, it was like, I knew it was just not something I would want to do domain, but I said yes. And I did a really good job for a long time. And that led to the next committee and the next committee. And because of that, I got put on a task force. And then the person who was the staffer for that is now my main point of contact for my sabbatical, like many, many years later, because that person's like, oh, like when she shows up, like she does work and like things get done. And so, that's been I don't even know, 10 plus year relationship, but it was only because I said yes to something that was a little not what I was envisioning for my career, but it was with the organization I wanted to be more involved with, if that makes sense. So it's not
Yeah.
like the no's, you also have to be careful of the no's, because if you want to be exposed to a space, like sometimes it's good to say some yeses, and then as you get to know it more, you're like, oh, this is or isn't what I want to continue to explore. But creating white space is the way that those things happen. And frankly, you get to focus on sometimes no's is just because you're busy and you like the things you're doing. You don't have to add to your plate always just because you could.
I love to hear you say this, Mia. I don't know if we would have been having this conversation, 5, 6 years ago in the same way.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I said no to three things that I'm like, oh, like I still kind of cringe and I'm like, I cannot believe I told those people no. They caught me at the end of my sabbatical. I was like, oh, poorly timed request. Like you don't know what I'm going through in terms of recombobulating to Summer's point.
Yeah. What
So
else have you learned on your sabbatical that you didn't really expect going into it?
I didn't realize how much it probably would also help my relationship with my family. I got close to my kids and close to my husband. We have a good relationship, but we had, everybody's got stuff. And that time where like I just was a little less traditionally busy in the way, let me make some 1% shifts for us, like, schedule some doctor's appointments that we wanted evaluations for and just ask questions. Like it was also summertime, so my kids were home and around more. So I had sort of a work schedule, but I just had a little more brain space to sort of dive into some stuff. And I think just again, a 1% shift can lead you in a totally different direction. And I can tell you that this school year with the kids has been 1,000 times easier than the last school year. And I never thought that would be an indirect benefit of more time. Like I didn't go in saying like, oh, the family needs a lot of help. Like I got to drill down and focus on the family. But, there's just some things that I was like, is that serving us? Do we want to, you know, be part of that sport and like set school up this way and resource up all of us that have really, really changed. I mean, we're just in a better space. I mean, there's no question. Rather than like me and my husband talking about it on the couch at 9:30, 10 o'clock at night for like while we're exhausted at the end of the day, like really putting a little intentionality around things that we thought maybe could shift a little. It's been insanely different. I never realized. And then, as you know, I had some personal stuff going on in my life, totally unexpectedly, like, multiple deaths and hospitalizations. And just by having time flexibility, I could be where I wanted to be without worrying about, moving patients. I mean, very concretely, like I don't take it lightly when I change my clinical schedule, and I didn't have to worry about that because I physically wasn't doing clinic. I mean, it's as simple as that, right? That was just a totally unexpected serendipity for hard times.
Yeah.
So I mean, you just all works together, this network of humans, and I was very, very grateful that I could be with, where I could help people at the time.
And just that like having that capacity just really opened up a lot.
Yeah.
What does it look like going back into work? So now you've been back 3 weeks. Obviously, you've learned what you've learned in this first iteration of your sabbatical, but what have you been noticing now that you're back?
Well, cultures have a strong pull for you to be very productive and not always in the ways that you want to be productive. And there is a bit of a recognition of that the institution of medicine or institution of your industry drawing you, whether it's by emails or the other things culturally, the way things are financed, structured, whatever, to draw you into certain activities, and that might not totally align with what you want to do. And so I feel like I just have, it's sort of like, I don't know, I'm a meditator. So like, it's like that non-identification where you just say like, oh, I see that. And I'm like, yeah, I want to do that. So we're good. We're lining up versus I see what you're doing there. and, and there's just like a lot of, yeah, a little bit more honesty about how I want to spend my time and not spend my time, and a little more intentionality that sort of separation creates. There's still things I'm evaluating. Like there's a couple things I'm like, I should really drop that. And I'm like, do I want to drop it? And, there's still stuff that's in that in between space that I haven't clarified because you do feel responsible for other, the community you're a part of. So Yeah. I mean, I think what's been really funny though is I tell a lot of people I've gone on sabbatical, and the number of people who keep saying, I've been meaning to do that. Oh, I should really do that. I can't believe I haven't done that yet. Like, so many people say they want to do it and then don't actually do it when all you have to do is kind of do it.
Mm.
It's like if you want to do it, like, so I think it also helps me because we get one every 7 years. And I'm like, okay, in 7 years, like my older son will be the summer before he goes to college. And like, I gotta, like, if I do it now, then when he's still around, I mean, I'm like doing math, and like, if not now, when kind of thing. And that's been fun to like see that space.
I want to go back to something that you had just said because you're like, well, it's not everything. You're like, you're still thinking about some of the things you may or may want to keep on your plate. But kind of what I hear in there is that you're actually giving yourself the option to choose. I think so many of us think like, well, I
Yes.
must say yes to this or I must do this. And it's like when you can take that moment to step back and not feel like you have
Yeah.
to say yes to absolutely everything. It's like that
Right.
permission to decide.
Well, really, I mean, unless you're in a, threatening physical situation, like everything's a choice, right? Like if you quit your job, it's a choice. Like there are consequences. I think it's just realizing you have the freedom to choose whatever you want, but all of those choices come with consequences, and like it's all trade-offs, right? Like doing a thing or not doing a thing. And which consequences are you willing to face? I mean, that's a direct pull from Oliver Berkman's new book, which I really, really
Yeah.
like. I like him. He's like my modern day muse or whatever
Yeah.
philosopher. I really like him. His new book's really good, but you're supposed to read a chapter a day. So I think I'm on chapter 3, and he's like,
What
it's
is it
just about
called?
meditations for mortals. But it's
Oh, good.
meditations, like reflections, not meditating. It's the theme of the day is, everything's a choice, but some have bad consequences. But if you think of it as a choice, you really are like, there's no must. I mean, I literally could give my whatever day notice today and walk away from my job, and there just be consequences to that. And I can walk away from a lot of these responsibilities and hats I leave, but there's just consequences to that. And I think what stalls you from decisions is noodling through those and weighing them. And a lot of times we don't give equal weight to the upsides and downsides. We're like, oh, these horrible things would happen if I did that, as
Yes.
opposed to, but these other amazing things would, like, because it's all unknown, right? You make a decision, and then what happens next, you can try to forecast, but like it's like, you can't forecast the weather in Michigan. I can tell you that. And so like, you just don't know, but you forget that could be very good
Yeah.
sometimes because your brain worries. So it's about forecasting the better scenario, not the worst.
Yeah. And like giving the airtime to both of those things because there's an
Yeah,
opportunity cost to not going towards something. There would have been a loss of not taking the sabbatical.
right.
And I think
I
it's
mean, a very
interesting.
simple thing is that my clinic day is on the same day as grand rounds. And the day I got back from sabbatical, I was like, hey, can I start my clinic later so I can actually attend full grand rounds? And the administrator is like, oh, well, we have a waiver for Thursdays. So, like, of course. And I was like, how have I been doing Thursday clinics since the pandemic and like never knew about the waiver? But it was just because I was like, no, I don't want to be seeing patients and missing grand rounds. That's like my education on like in ophthalmology weekly into my department and participation. And I was like, how, and just by making the choice to send that email and see two less patients a week or whatever, it's amazing. Like how many micro decisions you're not making that really could help your quality of life. Yeah,
Well, and it's when you start looking around and you're like, oh, what other options are there for me? What other opportunities? And it's like, wow, I didn't even know about this waiver that existed. I'm like, what else is out there for you? And questioning all those things. And I think it's also like a matter of like checking in with yourself. If you're like, oh, I'm dreading this, or this is suddenly adding to my day and I'm having a hard time not feeling rushed and this and that. It's like, well, does it even need to be like that? Could we make some shifts? And you and I have talked about that in a lot of different aspects of your life since then. It's just like, huh, what else could be true about how my household is run or this or that? So
yeah,
it's interesting to think about.
exactly.
All right. So for all of these people who say they would love to take a sabbatical but aren't, what advice would you give them?
I mean, I think probably the first step is to dream about how awesome it could potentially be. and really lock into like how potentially great it could be for you. I think that helped me at least start those initial conversations. And I think part two of that is really fleshing out, like finding other people who've done it, right? Especially in your own institution, if that's possible, because there's so many institutional nuances that I feel like it makes it, rather than say like, I know someone who went on sabbatical, like it feels really, it'll make it feel more real if you know someone at your institution who did it and came back and you're like, they're amazing, and or has a similar, it's not in medicine, right? I'm thinking very concretely in medicine, but like in your domain space, right? Because I think there's a lot, that dream coming down to like, wait, no, people have done this. This is not outside the scope. I don't know. I remember a really good coaching thing was like, you want to dream of something amazing, but not so impossible you're never going to even get there, right? So like that brings it back to like, no, this is actually a possible thing for me. And then just like, starting to talk about it more, putting it out there in the universe until it becomes more and more realistic and more possible for you. I mean, personally, I think finances are always an issue. So really understanding like how the financial consequences will create a lot of safety to say like, oh, okay, like this is what happens to my salary, or my, how I'll mind the gap, if there is a gap, because different, how long you on sabbatical, all those
Mm-hmm.
things will obviously factor in. So I guess it's about like dreaming big and then creating a lot of safety for yourself.
Yeah, and I will point back to that sabbatical project website too for this, because if you're not, say, in an institution where this is normalized to some extent, it can be hard to
Right.
even dream if you're like, well, nobody in my company or my institution's ever done this
Right.
before. And there's lots of examples on that website of like how people have gotten creative. And honestly, you'll just never know if it's a possibility for you unless you ask for it. So a lot of people have been surprised.
It's like the clinic waiver thing. Like, I guarantee you there are people they don't want everyone to go on sabbatical at the same time. Like, they're not exactly saying, hey, you're due for a sabbatical. Why haven't you gone yet? Like, it's not like culturally, I mean, which makes sense from an institution. They want productive workers that are part of their main mission, whatever that mission is. So you have to just say, hey, what does this look like here? And know that no might be the first answer, and or I don't think so might be the first answer, because it's not like it's going to be well, I hope that there are places that advertise it because they realize how much better their people are when they come back. I mean, I thought of so many creative ideas, like just in terms of what value I now bring to the institution. I know it was an up level, and like no question, like not even debatable. But it's hard because you're saying I'm going to step off the bullet train, do my thing, and then come back different, and that's hard for them too, right? Like they're trying to figure out what you're going to look like on the other side, so you have to create safety for them.
That's a really good point. Yeah, because they're fearful, probably like, are they going to go on sabbatical and never come back? Or what does that even look like? Um, when I think that goes back to your point about creating a vision for it, because nobody's going to hand this to you and be like, I would say very rarely would somebody hand it to you and be like, you need to go do this and here's what it looks like. It's got to be
Right.
generated on your field, like in your mind first. And then that helps you get comfortable with the idea in general as you start imagining what it could be like and all the possibilities there.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
I'm guessing that this has planted a seed for a lot of people. They're probably like, huh. And I hope that anybody listening is thinking about that. Like, maybe this is possible for me. And I really would encourage anybody, if they're immediately like, nah, that wouldn't work for me, is to poke at that, because you could find examples out there of lots of people who have taken a sabbatical, like a mini retirement from work, a mini break from work to pursue something on their own. So if you're disqualifying yourself, I would question that. Mia, is there
Well,
anything
and to
else?
to
Yeah, go
this
ahead.
point, I mean, you are a fantastic coach. I mean, so even if someone out there wants short-term coaching or focused coaching, like this is something that you really understand how to help people work through their fears, create safety, create excitement and exploration. I think that was a big thing of what you did, was sort of say like, oh my gosh, what's possible, and get me revved up and excited about it. So having you as a coach to guide me through it, I know made a lot of difference. And also really created some focus and constraint around it too. So it wasn't sort of this ephemeral thing. So I appreciate all aspects of what you provided during that time.
Oh, thanks, Mia. I appreciate you saying that. Um,
You're welcome.
is there anything else on your mind before we wrap up today?
No, I mean, yeah, no, I'm glad that we talked about it because I do think it was a wonderful structure to kind of take some time and think about things. And no, I encourage people if they're thinking about it just to learn a little bit more and see if it's enough that it seems like a good fit for them because it's unique, right? It's not something that everyone's going to do, but or has the opportunity to do, frankly. But if it's possible for you or could be possible for you, it's probably worth looking into.
Agree with that too. Well, thanks
Yeah.
again, Mia, for coming on the show today. It has been such a pleasure, and it's been cool to kind of be able to hash this out outside of the coaching sphere. So thank you again for coming on.
Oh, it's an absolute pleasure. It's always nice to talk to you, Lynn. Thanks for having me.
Likewise. Hey, friend. Thank you for listening to today's conversation. If you're considering a major career or lifestyle change and you want to talk to someone about this, I'm here for you. You can learn how to work with me one-on-one on my website, which is lynngrogan.com, and I also have details in the show notes. See you next time.